Hi guys, it's Wednesday, and that means classic rock. Today we're going to look at some of the albums of Van Morrison. Now, just to set the record straight, we're only going to look at some of the albums I have, because basically the show is about all that vinyl that I'm digging through, and really doesn't reflect my Van Morrison collection. I see the majority of my material of his is all on CD, and maybe we'll get to CDs a little bit later. But today we're just going to look at a couple of albums I picked up during the mid-'70s. Now, of course, I was familiar with Van Morrison. I mean, everybody was familiar with Brown Eyed Girl and Domino. Some of those songs got a lot of airplay. But I never really had a chance to see him perform until I saw him on television. And the show I saw him on was Saturday Night Live. Now, during this time, a lot of albums I bought were based on performance I'd seen on Saturday night. Van Morrison being one of them. A couple other examples would have been Talking Heads, Ricky Lee Jones. In later years, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. I bought an album of theirs based on their Saturday night performance. So it gave me an opportunity to see people I normally wouldn't get to see and weren't getting a lot of airplay on different radios. Okay, so the night that I had seen him, he performed two songs from his album Wavelength. This one, that was Wavelength and Kingdom Hall. And that was enough to get me to go out and check it out. So this is my first Van Morrison album, and as usually is the case, first one is often my favorite. And this is one of my favorites, although I think overall, when I got buying the CDs, probably one of my favorite Van Morrisons was The Healing Game. So there's a lot of material, he's got a large catalog, and what is surprising is, he doesn't really have a lot of airplay, or a lot of what I'm going to call hits. Back in mid-'80s, no, I'm going to say back in the mid-2000s, we went to see Van Morrison, and they had 30,000 people show up at the concert. And this was at a time where he hadn't had any airplay or any hits for I don't know how long, for years. And yet he could still draw those kind of crowds. Now, while I say this was the first album I bought, album I listened to a lot, another one of my favorites, was one that my wife had called Van Morrison and His Street Choir. And we used to listen to that one a lot. It predates this album. And it's, I think Domino might have been the main solo on that one, or the main single release. Very good album as well. I just couldn't find my copy of it, or the copy around the house. So this one, I'm thinking I could read the titles off to you, but probably not going to find a hit in there, other than Wavelength and Kingdom Hall were the two big ones. And again, he didn't have a lot of hits. But Van Morrison was an unusual performer in that when he signed with a record label, he usually signed as a producer, not as a performer. So he had a lot more control over what he performed or what he recorded. Now, some of them were very eclectic, not always easily accessible. One album that I bought, and some of you may have had it, Common One. I mean, lots of people may love this. I just couldn't get into it. It wasn't the Van Morrison I wanted to hear. It was just a little too, I don't want to say laid back, but a little too meditative. It really wasn't the rock and Van Morrison I was looking for. But some of you may like it, and it'd be worth checking out. Another album I picked up, and again, this one was very popular as well, Into the Music, not to be confused with Into the Mystic. And probably one of the main hits out of this was Bright Side of the Road. And that was recorded by Delbert McClinton as well as a hit for him. I'm trying to see, and probably not a lot of other things on here. That's the strange thing about Van Morrison. He didn't have a lot of hits. He put out albums and a lot of good material on them, but when people came to the concerts, they were looking for those old songs, and a lot of times they got music they really weren't that familiar with. But he was a great performer and really very captivating, and turned out a lot of material. I think of him being in the category, well, not in the category, but similar to John Mayall, who's had a fantastic career, draws lots of crowds, and you really can't name a lot of hits. But the fans, they follow them. They know the songs from the albums. And the fun thing about that is with these albums, not having singles or hits that you're kind of hooked into already, it gives you a whole different set of ears when you're listening to the album. You're listening to everything for the first time and getting impressions about that, because I know a lot of times with albums that had singles, you would listen to that and then everything else was just kind of just out of whack a little bit. It really wasn't the same because you were centering on those singles. These songs weren't that way. The whole album was a discovery. And that's what made it a lot of fun as well. Certainly one of the great performers of my generation. I don't even know what to recommend for you. There's just so many albums out there, so much good stuff. But if you haven't had a chance to hear Van Morrison, check him out. It might be something that you've just been looking for. Anyways, that's it for Wednesday. We'll see you on Friday when we're looking at comedy. Everybody stay home, stay safe, and have a good night.